are completing 10 years of community radios in India. A decade is not a long time, and yet it's a long time. Depends on how you look at these 10 years. We began perhaps very cautiously 10 years ago, and very modestly as well. And the initial policy only talked about permitting educational institutions, and that to government institutions, preferably, to set up community radio stations. But there was a revision in the policy midway, and the notable feature of that revision was that we allowed not-for-profit, non-government organizations also to set up community radio stations. And I think that has made a lot of difference. Today, almost 40% of the functional community radio stations are basically run by non-government organizations. And it is my fervent wish that when we meet next 10 years from now, which I'm certain we will, I think we will have 90% of the community radio stations in this particular sector. I think 10 years is actually completing a decade, actually an occasion to celebrate. We look at what we have been able to do, feel encouraged, feel motivated to do much more and much better. But I think it is also a time to really take stock of what all could have been done better. And more importantly, how do we really consider the way forward? How do we really plan the way forward? What kind of innovations, what kind of improvements, what kind of new ideas we can incorporate in taking this whole movement forward. In my own view, I think the pace of establishing community radio stations, the pace of setting up community radio stations, need to be stepped up significantly. In fact, we are very happy that there are 144 functional radio stations. There are more than 400 LOIs, letters of intent. So there's a gap of almost 250 to 300 radio stations which are, we would like to believe, are in the process of being set up. But I think a country like India needs thousands of community radio stations. And I think all of us collectively should try to work out, to try to see how do we create that enabling environment, and how do we inculcate that kind of entrepreneurship, the involvement of the community, to make sure that such numbers actually become a reality. All of us here, I would like to believe, have very strong commitment. Very strong commitment. And therefore, when you talk about your projects, when you talk about the issues, I'm sure you are very passionate about those issues. And therefore, one of the gains that I expect, I personally expect from these consultations and deliberations from you during these 3 days, is to get a new perspective and new ideas. We also perhaps need to remember that often the conventional thinking or the stereotype thinking may not get us out of an equilibrium that we often reach, or to put it somewhat more bluntly, to really get out of the stagnation. And I'm reminded of a poem by Robert Frost, and it says, the title of the poem is "The Road Not Taken." The road not taken. And I'll quote, and says, "I shall be saying this with a sigh. I shall be saying this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence. Somewhere ages and ages hence. two roads diverged in a wood. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So I think there is perhaps a case to take a less traveled road. And I suppose there is a tremendous scope for lateral thinking, and perhaps to be able to embrace certain degree of boldness and risk to find a new paradigm for a faster growth of community radio stations in India. I'd also like to reiterate and reaffirm that the movement of community radio stations in India is a collective endeavor. The government provides a policy framework. The governments may provide an enabling environment, but I think essentially it is people who are sitting across us, people who are actually aspiring, or people who have set up community radio stations or are aspiring to set up community radio stations, who actually will be taking this initiative forward and actually fructifying it or actualizing it or putting it on ground in reality. And therefore, we don't need to really talk only about ideas and innovations, but also we need to talk about responsibilities that go with throwing those ideas out and making sure that these initiatives and these new ideas are carried forward and they are implemented. So as we celebrate a decade of community radio movement in India, we also need to reflect on the challenges, impediments, difficulties, and also the excitements and opportunities that the coming times offer to us, and put our collective wisdom to think, deliberate, and charter the future course of action, planning and action as far as this particular movement is concerned. Let me share with you some of the perspectives, my own perspectives on these issues. And I really want to mention 7 issues which are important from my point of view. Let me begin with this whole issue of spectrum fee. And I think this is one which is on the top of the issues that are agitating your minds. From 19,000 to 91,000 is a big leap, and something which perhaps was not very advisable. But as we have told, and perhaps we tried to really do that yesterday, also when we had this day from yesterday, we had this Twitter conference. We also tried to say that when we proactively took up the matter once it was brought to our notice. We took up the matter in the Department of Telecom. I had personally written to the Secretary and followed it up. And then our feedback is that the spectrum fee has been waived, but there are certain procedures which are required. And I think those procedures are underway. And soon, I really can't make a commitment because it is not in my hands, but it is expected that this waiver thing, a complete waiver of your spectrum fee should become a reality very, very soon. Spectrum is an extremely valuable resource that we have got, and please do not squander it in any way. I really do not need to emphasize this, nor do I need to amplify this. But I think this is something which would have, if we are not able to make efficient use of the resource that has been given to us at no cost or at a subsidized cost, I think it becomes all the more incumbent upon us to make sure that nobody criticizes us for not using this very, very rare and valuable resource, not efficiently. I think that will be very unfortunate. So please make sure that this is also part of your thought process when you talk about spectrum. The second issue that I want to raise is about sustainability. I think this is one key issue that is bothering us, certainly us, and I'm quite sure all of you too, because a community radio is not a community radio if it works for 6 months and closes down. It must be there for years and years together and must be expanding in this whole process. We have to make sure that we have very, very viable financial models to run. And we do not have non-serious players in this field, because if we have non-serious players in this field and they somehow manage to get the permission, and then these community radio stations close down, a large number of them close down, or they're not functional, then I think that is going to bring about some amount of discredit to this whole movement. So sustainability becomes a big, big issue. Now, we have been considering a scheme. We should give some kind of a financial assistance to permission holders. But it is not a very simple matter. In what way the financial assistance should be given? Should it be a grant or should it be a loan? How much of it should be given? 100%, 75%, 50%, 25%? How much would be a correct percentage to be given? What would be your mechanism? Because when you give a loan or a grant, what you are doing is that you are giving public's money, people's money, to an organization, and therefore all those accounting things come into play. Lots of people don't come to governments because when the governments give grant, they involve you in so much of paperwork that becomes extremely frustrating and very difficult. So all of those who have an experience of getting a grant from government ministries will vouch that it is not often, it is not a very pleasant experience. And sometimes it is decidedly very unpleasant. So we have to really work out a mechanism. And I will seriously urge all of you, and my colleagues also, to really work out something which is easy to implement. It doesn't take much time actually for resources to be given to them and minimizes paperwork. But this requires a lot of innovative thinking. One idea was that why doesn't the ministry stand guarantee to a loan which a community radio may be able to raise from the market, from the banks. We have a model in telecom, where the telecom companies, they raise loan from the banks, and I think Department of Telecom and Ministry of Information Broadcasting, they stand kind of a guarantee, become like a guarantor, so that there is, in case of a default, they can come and claim it from the ministry. There could be new ideas, more innovative ideas as to what should be a financial model, which is hassle-free, which is absolutely transparent, because transparency is one thing on which we are just not ready to negotiate. The ministry is absolutely certain that transparency is a commodity, transparency is a policy which we will not compromise, will not negotiate at any cost. So we really need to work out very, very carefully as to what models we work out. Because individuals may be here, but individuals may not be there a few years from now. So the systems must be such that ensure that there is equity, and there is fairness, and there is transparency, and there is efficiency in the system of granting of financial assistance. I think this is a task, a very, very serious task, which all of us need to really consider. We have done our own bit. DAVP, for instance, you can really advertise the rates that DAVP used to offer earlier of ₹1 per second has been raised to ₹4 per second. And this is subject to revision. If there is good response, and we find that advertising on community radio of government programs is very effective, then nothing stops us to really think of revising it upwards. But we have to really establish that it is an effective way of disseminating of government's programs. So the sustainability issue is very, very critical and very crucial that we really need to debate, deliberate, talk about, and perhaps also share amongst us which ones have been able to really come up with ideas that make their financial survival or financial sustainability easier. Sharing of information among the whole network of community radio stations perhaps may be an extremely good idea, not only for this, but several other issues. The third issue in my mind is the human resource development and the capacity building. And I was extremely happy to see some organizations which are actually very actively working in this direction, in this field. And when I talk about capacity building, it's a range of capacity. It's not merely managerial capacity building, but technical capacity building, financial capacity building, the whole range of things which are involved. I'm willing to really suggest that in addition to considering a package for financial support to community radio stations, we should also be able to perhaps run a scheme where we encourage organizations, either out of government or in government like basis, if they are able to conceive of good training programs, I think these organizations get some kind of a support from us. Because I think there need to be a host of organizations which should get into this business of capacity building. It's easy to really start an enterprise, but to be able to sustain it and improve it is a more daunting task. And I think there the capacities actually make the difference. So I personally think that we in the ministry will be willing to consider some kind of scheme which helps an institutionalized capacity building or organized capacity building a much easier task to really accomplish. The fourth issue in my mind is about reaching the unreached. I think the way community radio stations have come up across the country is somewhat very imbalanced. We have states which have a large number of like Tamil Nadu and Uttar Pradesh, but we have states in Northeast, Jharkhand, where we have hardly any community radio stations. And I think I like to urge all of you to really spread the message to your acquaintances, to your friends, or to your professional partners, wherever they are, to really take it up very, very seriously. I think the more backward an area, the greater utility of community radio is for that area. But often it happens in the inverse order. The more developed an area, the larger is the number of community radio stations. I think we need to really correct this equation. And we need to really see that those areas which are still not covered by community radio stations. How should we do this? Does it require special incentives for Northeast or border areas? Or does it require a different kind of approach? I think these are the things which you should really think and let us know as to what the government should be doing about it. Fifthly, I would like to re-emphasize, and which I suppose Additional Secretary also hinted towards it, is please keep the community your focus. It has to be central in every endeavor that you undertake. Because the soul of community radio is the community. And the community gets marginalized, I think the community radios lose their sanctity altogether. So, in your conception, in your thought process, in your implementation, in your content creation, I think the community must be uppermost in your mind. And perhaps there could be no other medium more suited or better suited than community radio stations to protect, preserve, and promote local cultures whether it's music, folk music, or whether it's a local cuisine, or it's a local attire, or it's a local tradition, whatever may be unique about that community, I suppose community radio stations should be instrumental in ensuring that these traditions are really not only protected, preserved, but actually they get known to people outside those communities. Sixthly, I'll mention about something which is slightly problematic, but I'll do that nevertheless, and that is the issue of ethics. I think it may sound slightly out of fashion these days to talk about ethics, given that the current environment and the way broadcasting takes place, whether it is television or whether it is social media. But I do believe that community radios have to really be treated, and they must consider themselves slightly on a different foot. Because perhaps the impact that you are creating would be very, very intense, and it is not likely to be diffused like in a centralized transmission. So I think that issue, I'm quite sure that if there will be a setback to a movement ever, it will be only on account of this. So we will be doing a great disservice to this movement if we are not careful about it and allow people to really believe that what is coming or what is being broadcast is something which is actually it doesn't actually match or doesn't actually pass the muster. Lastly, I will again re-emphasize the collective ownership of all the initiatives. The ministry has been very proactive and has worked very, very hard. The whole team of the ministry, Joint Secretary, Under Secretary, section officers, the whole community radio wing, they are a set of extremely, extremely committed and extremely hardworking. But at the end of the day, the whole process is a collective. And as I mentioned that while the government may be laying down policy guidelines, I think the actual implementation has to be done by people like you. And I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that given the progress that we have made and given the comfort that we have in the quality of people who are involved in the running of community radio stations today, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that this process will certainly become much, much more strong in days to come. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need to really rediscover everything afresh. And so the initiatives which I saw, where you can perhaps get all the best practices at one place, you can get all the content at one place, and there could be a method of sharing the content. Then I think we need to really make the best use of technology these days. I think what we can really lose on account of paucity of human resources can be made good by making intelligent and adequate use of technology.